Yeah, mic check, mic check, mic check. What's going on, man? We are officially live again. Welcome, man, to Kickin the Real podcast. I am your host, Andy Deossa. I'm excited. Episode 2. I'm sorry I left y'all for so long. You know, life be happening. We got to deal with some things. But we got a special guest in the building today. My brother, all the way from South Florida, host of Miami Total Football Radio, the show.
Hey, muy bien.
Franco Panizo, my boy. Thanks for coming through the kick with me. How you doing, man?
I'm very good, brother. Very good. Keeping busy with all things Inter Miami, and yeah, it's been a busy few weeks to start the season, but everything's good, man. Everything's good. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good, brother. Can't complain. It's been busy on this side too, but I know a lot of the attention is down in South Florida, rightfully so. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the jerseys in the back there. I want to give Franco a shout out before we even get started because we're talking about Inter Miami. This is a very Miami episode, so if you don't like that, I'm sorry. But he's a day one. He's an OG. He's an OG covering this team, and I think I love that there's so much attention around Inter Miami now, and my boy's getting the shine because he's been there from the beginning, and not many can say that. So you're gonna get great insight from one of the best that's been around from the beginning, and now is right in the madness down in South Florida. So you guys are in for a good one. Let's start with one thing I like to start with always is kind of just ask, what's your origin in the sport? Like, what got you into it? Was it a team? Was it a family member? Was it a game? A certain player? What was it that got you in at a young age that has now led to all this great stuff you're able to do as an adult?
Usually for us Latinos, it's family, right? It comes down from pops, and my stepdad as well. My family's Peruvian. My stepdad's Peruvian, and this football is a way of life, and it was just trickled down to me and my brother at a young age. I think my earliest memory is U.S. playing, I think, Colombia in that 1994 World Cup. I was 5 years old at that point, and I just remember watching it with my dad and my brother in Homestead, a little bit, South Miami, and the U.S. wins, and we jumped in the pool, we're like fully clothed, and that was like I was 5 years old, and I didn't really know what was happening, but I was excited because my dad was excited, and that's since then it's just everything's kind of snowballed, and then ended up being somewhat of a career, and here we are. I am the only. Here's a fun fact for you, Andy. I am the only member of I guess in all media in the world that's been to every Inter Miami home game. The only one. Even the other OGs have missed a home game for one reason or the other, whether it was personal or professional, whatever. But I'm the only one that's been to every single home game. I actually just missed a Peruvian buddy's wedding in Honduras because I needed to keep my streak going. So
Look at that, man. That's crazy. That's on top of facts. And you were here when they played the first game too, right? In LA, correct?
That was right before, a couple weeks before the pandemic hit. Yeah, I was there.
I remember it all started here in LA, technically, when the first game happened. So it's pretty cool, and that leads me in perfectly to how I want to start this. Is from day one to now, like obviously things have changed drastically. And you mentioned a good thing. A pandemic's right there in the middle, so that season itself was really weird. But what have you? I mean, we'll talk about the big names and how that's changed. But what have you seen change from that time? I'm sure elbow room's a little harder to come about in certain training sessions. I'm sure the press box is not as comfortable sometimes because it's not really big down there in what's now called Stadium, what was before Drive Pink Stadium. But what have you seen in certain changes in just how the momentum of this team has grown? Because it was always there. There's always David Beckham. There's always aspirations for big name players, but now you're seeing that dream fulfilled.
So, I mean, there's always been a lot of hype with Inter Miami, right? Since even before they had a team. Early on, though, it definitely felt like an expansion team. I don't know if you had the same sensation when LAFC started over there, because, I mean, LAFC's had the bells and whistles, not only away from the field, but also on the field and, the fan base and everything. But Inter Miami, take nothing away from the fan base, but the operation itself, it early on, it definitely felt like an expansion team, a team that was still figuring things out. I mean, you go back, Paul McDonough was the general manager. They didn't hire Diego Alonso, who was the first head coach until, well into the process before, he should have had much more time, ideally, to build the roster and build his players or get the players he wanted. And it just wasn't the case because, there were other candidates that they were going after that just didn't work out. So it definitely felt early on like it was still all being pieced together. Like they were freestyling a little bit. I know you played that little hip hop there at the beginning of the show. I was hoping for some reggaeton, my friend. But no, so it definitely felt like it was a startup team, an expansion team. It had all the makings, even though the cameras were bright and Beckham would make his appearances to draw interest. it definitely felt like behind the scenes that it was very much an expansion team that was, it had training wheels on at times. We're still figuring things out on the fly. And then obviously then the pandemic hit and that slowed everything down. And with time, as the team has learned, as the organization has learned, they've gotten obviously to a much different level now, especially with Messi. It's a much more polished organization now and much more experienced organization across the board. And you feel that in different ways. Remnants and ghosts of those years past. It's all, it's the 5th season already. They still linger though. They still linger. Actually, the press box has been super hot. The air conditioner broke, so I don't know what happened. This week we were in there, and I like to wear my suits to the game. I was sweating, man. The guy next to me, Pedro Gonzalez, he took his jacket off because he was sweating. So yeah, it was. I mean, there's still little bits and pieces. Like, I mean, this is a fun fact as well, Andy, and I don't know if you got to experience this firsthand during your visit. The construction of the stadium, there's the press box, and then there's 2 bathrooms behind the press box. So you can go and do what you need to do in there. The walls are so thin that in one of the bathrooms, you can hear everything that's happening in there from the press box. So sometimes you're in the middle of watching the game and you hear some not so pleasant sounds or conversations. And again, there's little remnants of what Inter Miami was in 2020 when it began. But again, overall, it's much more polished now. And I imagine it's only going to get better and better with each passing year. And once they open up that new stadium in Miami.
And this behind the scenes is awesome because as somebody has been to the stadium now a few times, I understand. Obviously, if you go in the summer, it's different because the heat is crazy down there. But just the AC not working in the press box sounds like I would be miserable. And then all of the little things that people don't get to see or hear about. So this is why we're here, man. We only bring you quality stuff. You're gonna hear this.
Yeah, you get to hear people peeing and doing other things in the bathroom. Yeah, there you go. That's the context and insight I'm bringing you.
Let's go, baby. I love how like the construction of the stadium, it really is just like a makeshift stadium. Like we're here for a little bit, and now even just adding the bleachers to the corners, I'm like, this is crazy how you have all these global stars now playing there, and there's so many eyes on Inter Miami, and this is the product there that they're getting. But like you mentioned, the stadium in Miami, that's going to be a game changer for sure, and I'm excited for that. And hopefully, whenever that's done, be down there visiting it up again.
Absolutely.
Like it's kind of hard because when you have MLS conversations, everybody like this is the part that gets me. Everybody's like, "Oh, Miami this, Miami that," and it's like, man, if a league and a team has one of the best players ever, arguably the best player ever to do it, you're gonna run it up any which way you can. So the people that say that there's too much conversation about Miami and things like that, it's must-see TV every single time. Yeah, it's must-see TV every single time, and that is what it is. So there's a very interesting conversation happening around what's going on with Miami because the preseason thing was one aspect that I don't even want to touch on because it's nonsense that people even put that much weight into preseason. But like now it's a very prevalent conversation that people are talking about Miami and CONCACAF Champions Cup compared to Miami and MLS and the rest. And you hear Tata Martino already starting to get a little frustrated, which is not surprising for him, saying about rotations. So I want to start with CONCACAF and then we'll go into the MLS play for Miami. I mean, if you think about that game against Nashville, to me, it seemed like a game that they probably should have lost. And you get to this point that now you have players, game winners that you could count on that have done this at the highest levels all over the world. And then Luis Suarez gives you 2 goals, and now you got a tie game. Now you have away goals. Now you're going back to South Florida. I mean, in my book, it's like there's no way they lose to Nashville and get bounced from that tournament so quickly because that does seem like it's a priority for them. But what do you see that breakdown kind of how that first game transpired and what awaits them in Miami for leg 2?
So, I mean, I agree with you there in the sense that just with the experience that they have, la jerarquía, as we say in Spanish, I mean, Inter Miami is never going to be an easy out. Like I just maybe a one-off here and there, but by and large, this team's going to be in every single game, even if they're down 2 goals late on, just because they have that quality in the attack to make that difference. I mean, you saw it in LA against the Galaxy. Galaxy were the better team, and yet Messi, in one moment in stoppage time, found the quality that was needed and tied the game up and got Inter Miami a share of the spoils. Same thing happened in Nashville. Inter Miami didn't play particularly well, and yet they found a way to come back and get something out of that one with 2 big away goals that sets them up very nicely on Wednesday night here. Look, man, I'm with you. I was talking to my podcast co-host after the game yesterday against CF Montreal, and I agree fully with you that I just don't see Inter Miami losing that game. Can they tie? Sure, but they've got 2 big away goals. Had they not gotten that second away goal, things might have gotten a little bit trickier for them. But with 2 away goals, I mean, they're sitting pretty. They have the advantage at home. I just don't see Nashville outdoing them. I mean, what's Nashville? Nashville needs to score goals and win, right? So what's Nashville going to do? Are they going to come out and press, or are they going to sit back and defend? Because if they sit back and defend, Inter Miami can literally just knock the ball from side to side for 90 minutes. Won't make for the most pleasing game in terms of aesthetics, but I mean that'll do it for Inter Miami to get to the next round. So I mean Nashville has to at some point push the tempo, and that's when Inter Miami, you give Messi some space, and I assume he will play on Wednesday after not playing over the weekend. So at that point, you give Messi space, and he's going to probably punish you more often than not. So I think Inter Miami goes through. I think the first leg, how it ended, really, really helps Inter Miami's chances of making it to the next round of this competition. How much further they go, well, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That second away goal, man, like it's huge, and the fact that it's Luis Suarez that gets it, because I was one that somewhat jokingly, but somewhat seriously, also was like, I don't know if this is going to be the best idea for Inter Miami to have a player like Luis Suarez, who the injury concern was the big thing, but then everybody's like, look what he did in Brazil, and then he has a slow preseason. So there's like all these give back and forth takes, but it's like you see what he could do if he gets the right service. He doesn't need much time, more space. He could one-time it, and we've seen him do this years and years and years. So, I mean, I think that you mentioned it, I kind of want to bring that point up. Is like, is there a path for this team? Because this is what it seems like. They want to win this tournament. Obviously, coaches are going to tell you they want to win everything. But for Messi to be on a stage like this, it's different for him. It's different for where he is. Like, they want to win this tournament. Does it seem like there might be a path forward? Because I'm looking like they're going to either play Monterrey or Cincinnati if they advance to the quarterfinals, which I don't think Monterrey is an easy draw per se. I think they would benefit from playing another MLS team for sure. But then, like, on the other side of the bracket, 3 of the 4 teams remaining, and that side that they would have to, theoretically play in a semifinal are MLS teams as well, because Columbus playing Houston, and it's Orlando and Tigres. So there's a reason, there's a way this could happen, that Miami gets to the semifinal or to the finals and has been playing all MLS teams in this tournament, which would be almost like too perfect for it to happen that way. But do you think there is like a way forward for them to like, hey, we're going to try to win this tournament, man?
I mean, they definitely want to win the tournament. Do they have a team capable of winning the tournament? I mean, unless, like you just mentioned, they get the Leagues Cup treatment where they played one Mexican team and the rest was MLS teams through the rest, and they won the trophy that way. And listen, don't take anything away from the accomplishment they did. They did it. But yes, the fact is they only played one Mexican team in that competition. If something similar can happen here, then maybe they have a chance. If they go up against Mexican opposition, I imagine at some point that will be it for them, because I just don't think the team is where it needs to be in terms of how it's gelling, how it's performing. There's a lot of new pieces that have come in, still figuring it out. You got Nicolas Freire, Federico Redondo. There's just new pieces in place there that are important pieces. They don't know if they want to play with a back 5 or a back 4. It kind of still alternates, depending on the situation, who's available. So I don't think when you're playing against a Mexican team that has unlimited spending abilities, right, and they can build a defense as well as they can build an attack, because they have that unlimited salary or budget or whatever. They don't have the roster restrictions MLS has. I think that's when Inter Miami is going to really go up against it. Yes, they have Messi, and you never want to count out a team that has Messi. But, I mean, for my seat, I just don't think the team is where it needs to be as a collective in terms of the gelling and the chemistry to make it to that tournament if they play Mexican teams. I mean, there's a reason why only one MLS team has won. Well, what was the Champions League? It's now the Champions Cup. There's a reason for that. So, while it's Messi, and a lot of people are going to expect Messi because it's his team, if you take a more realistic approach to looking at the things, in my opinion, then it's going to be an uphill climb for Inter Miami. Listen, if the dominoes fall their way, the chips fall their way, then, they play all MLS teams. Listen, I give Inter Miami a chance against any MLS team on any given day. Against Mexican teams, depending on who it is, I think it's a, el nivel de exigencia, the demand, the level of the demand is a bit higher, and I think that's where they're going to run into some issues, especially defensively, because MLS, teams build or put most of their money into the attack. Because MLS wants goals, MLS wants people to go ooh and ah with the attacking play, even if that means the defense. You have college kids playing in some of those positions, so rosters aren't imbalanced in terms of their makeup. But when you play internationally and you're playing teams and leagues that don't have those restrictions, those teams are much more balanced, across the lines. So I think that's where Inter Miami, maybe they'll score a couple goals, but they're going to give up some goals as well, in my opinion. And I think that's that. I don't think they'll have what it takes to win this unless, again, they favor or they face off against mostly MLS teams.
Yeah, no, that's a great point you bring up about just the roster constructions. And if they do end up playing Monterrey in the next round, given that they beat Nashville and Monterrey takes care of Cincinnati, like I think the emotional part starts coming into play, and it's kind of what you're mentioning about different teams, like Mexican league teams per se. They're gonna, and we've seen. I've been want to make this joke for a while. Like Miami's averaging like 2 fights a game. Like they're getting annoyed. Like they're getting angry. You're seeing them push people. Like, and I don't know if it's a little bit of like the big brother, like do not push our people around. Like these are some legends, or like teams are really starting to poke them because we saw what Orlando did last year to them in that first game they played, that they really got under their skin. And that was, to me, a benefit to the South Americans that play for Orlando, that were like, yo, we're not going to take this lightly because we've played against these players in bigger competitions or for national teams and whatnot. So to me, I'm like, if they line up with a Mexican team, they're going to kind of be in that same DNA of like, let's try to get under their skin. And I think that's when it starts getting really interesting for Miami, because sure, you don't want to get them too mad because then you see Messi like come and have a moment of brilliance or whatever. But at the same time, they're your opponents. You have to play them the same way you would play anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you saw that in that first leg against Nashville, seeing the Champions Cup. When Anibal Godoy got in Messi's face and like showing him like, okay, you're Messi, but I'm not backing down from you. And I do think this is just my sensation from the outside, not information, just my sensation, that because of who they are and what they've accomplished in their careers, like they don't really think that anyone should be like chirping at them in that way. Like they get really bothered when that happens. So they're like, who are you? What, you've never been at my level. That's just how I interpret it. Doesn't mean this is the truth, but this is just how I interpret it. Just because how angry they got back at like an opponent just be getting in their face or complaining, and it to me it says a lot about like we play at the highest level, and who do you think you are to try to get in our face? And look, like I said, if you're the opponent team or opposing team, why not? Why not get under their skin a little bit? Let them feel uncomfortable. Let them know they're not in for an easy day. Like you said, you obviously don't want to overdo it and poke the bear too much, because the bear will wake up and then you might find yourself in trouble. But you also have to show, for lack of a better phrase, you have to show that respect with some disrespect, a little bit. Because if you show them too much respect and you treat them with like, oh well, they're so good, then obviously you're overdoing it. And you're not really doing yourself any favors. So absolutely, I think Nashville's going to do it again. I think the blueprint is there for teams that have that edge and that have those type of players. If you can get under Messi's skin, you can get under these players' skin a little bit, maybe you have a chance to pull it off.
I love it, man. And the thing is, like, if you want to, ask for the jersey after or the picture after, like, I get all that, man. Like, I think that they like a majority.
He might tell you no, though. He might tell you no. He might be like, no.
Like, at the end of the day, you're of course a fan if you're like a younger player, but when the ball is rolling, you guys are competitors, and that's what it needs to come down to. And I think back to the Galaxy game, like when they were here, like Edwin Cerrito, who was a kid, he was like, I'm not backing up from any of these guys, like Luis Suarez or Busquets or Messi. And even asking him after the game, he was like, I don't even remember what I said to them. I was almost shocked that he was even talking to me, but I know that like I wasn't gonna let whatever slide. And I'm like, that's the mentality you have to have. And that's I'm telling you, I feel like every game I've watched them play so far this year, there's been a few dust ups in each one of them. And I'm like, that blueprint is starting to be laid, like you mentioned, because I would be doing the same thing. So I love it.
I agree with that. And I guess that's controversial, I guess, in this day and age. There's some people that like are really in favor or like the fact that last year after some of these games, some MLS players were taking pictures and selfies with Messi, and it didn't matter if they won or lost or whatever. And like, I'm not of that thought. Like, you're there, you're a professional player. Yes, you're playing against one of the best players of all time. If you want to try to take a picture in the locker room, like, okay, but like doing it like with a smile on your face after you've lost a game, like that just doesn't sit well with me. But I know people think differently. So
no, for sure. Let's transition into Miami and MLS play, because we've seen them be a little all over the place, and you kind of alluded to it earlier. Like they definitely haven't been gelling the way that maybe some people would expect. And once again, it could be a lot of things. You have a few pretty significant injuries in that preseason that you now have to kind of make sure that you're filling up those holes. And now you're still having people come in and now the rotation of rest. This past game against Montreal, like once again, you see a moment where a quick Busquets flip into Jordi Alba shot, and you're like, oh, here we go again. Like they could just make
Right.
magic out of nothing.
They were right
But
back in it, just like that. They were right back
just
in the
like
game.
that. But you mentioned it, and like the flaws that they're showing, specifically on defense, specifically set pieces, like they go from a thrashing of Orlando, which was probably the best they've looked ever, and but then the same thing about the Galaxy game, like they got thoroughly outplayed in that game. But once again, they got that messy moment, and it's like, cool, that's a point on the road, which any MLS team will tell you that they'll take that. So, what do you kind of see like from them in MLS play in terms of, since they're balancing so much? Is there like, is a supporter shield even something that they should be thinking about, or like should they just be like, let's manage this as we can? Because once this is over, whenever CONCACAF is over, then you get Leagues Cup, and then you're like once again juggling a few different things, and the longevity in the season is so long that what is their goal in MLS? Is it just to kind of stay afloat and say, hey man, everybody gets into the playoffs basically anyway, like let's just ride it out until it's time to really turn up?
Publicly, they've said they want to compete on all fronts. They want to go for every trophy. But that's public talk. That's for media. That's for fans. The reality is, when these coaches and these general managers sit and they plan out the year, I mean, they have an idea of what they're really going to go after and how they see the year unfolding and what the best case scenario is. I don't think supporter shield is at all something in the conversation for Inter Miami. I mean, Messi's going to be gone for the Copa America. There's potential, that he could also go for the Olympics. I know Inter Miami wouldn't want to lose him for 2 months this summer, but I mean, if Messi pushes for that, I mean, is Inter Miami really going to push back? I mean, that'd be an interesting story to watch unfold. He's going to be gone for portions of the year. Other players are going to be gone due to international call-ups. That's where Inter Miami's depth is going to have to step up, and I just don't see the depth being enough to keep a high level where they're winning the supporter shield. When they have the best, their best 11 on the field, and they have the Cuatro Fantásticos, the Fantastic Four of Messi, Suarez, Busquets, and Alba, they're as good as any MLS team, or they can be as good as any MLS team. Look, it all came together, like you mentioned, against Orlando City in what I call the Sunshine Clásico, the Clásico del Sol. It all came together. They scored early. They scored often. Ganaron, gustaron, golearon. So that's the version of Inter Miami that people dreamed of. Now it's about finding that consistently, or as consistent as possible. Because up to this point, that's been the one exception overall in terms of their collective performance. Because in a lot of other games, they've struggled. They've had a bad half. They've had a bad start. They've had a bad game. But, they were able to get something out of it. We talked about the game against the Galaxy. We talked about the first leg against Nashville. Those games they didn't necessarily play all that well in, and yet they got something out of those games. Now, this game against CF Montreal, Tata said that he thinks they should have won. I don't agree with that. I think he's in the Phil Neville school of denial in that sense, because look, Inter Miami had its moments in the attack, but it always came from a trailing position when the onus was on them to look for a goal. And yes, if they missed some chances, sure, but those chances would have tied the game. Those chances wouldn't have put them ahead in the game. So they didn't play that well. They gave up goals on set pieces, a bit soft, especially on that first goal from the marking from Thomas Aviles, the young Argentine center back. And they were made to pay this time. They still almost found a way. They still almost, because who they have and the team that they are, they were down 3-1. Busquets flicks a pass with his lanky leg over to Jordi Alba. And Jordi Alba on the one time smacks it into the top corner, 3-2. Then they were full, all numbers forward, and Schneider Borgelin had a great look that maybe he should have put away, and he didn't put it away, and it came down to that. But, they were within one shot of tying that game. So, again, this team, this needs to be said. Like, I think it's clear, but just so that it's abundantly clear. Again, with how MLS rosters are and the numbers and the budgets and the cap, teams build their attacks, and they leave the defense for after. It's an afterthought with the way MLS is today in 2024. Inter Miami's apuesta, Inter Miami's plan, their game plan, their gamble is they're going to outscore you. This team is not looking to be, a team that sits in a deep block and wants to close up the spaces and wants to hold you to a 1-0. No, this team with Messi, with Suarez, with the attacking power that it has, if you want to throw in Robert Taylor, Busquets, pinging in passes from deep, they want to outscore you. If you score 2 goals, so be it. They're going to try to score 4. And that's what Inter Miami is betting on. They're betting on being more powerful than the other teams in the attack. Now, if they get a clean sheet like they've gotten on a couple of occasions this season, then great. Obviously, they'll take that. But when they're pushing numbers forward, and they're pushing their lines high, and you're leaving a whole lot of space in the back, I mean, your gamble is that you're looking to score goals. You're looking to take it to the other team. So they'll give up goals, and they're okay with that so long as they deliver on the other end, which is where their quality is, which is where, they on paper are more elite than almost or any other MLS team.
No, that's a great point. And like having, having a Luis Suarez, having a Jordi Alba, Sergio Busquets, Lionel Messi, like no team has a luxury of having those players. So once again, you have the Cuatro Fantásticos, like you're gonna take your chances with them, but there's gonna be those moments where you're talking about bad defending and set pieces and things.
Of course,
like
that. Of course, that's part of it. That's part of it, 100%. Like if you're gonna put numbers forward, you're gonna leave space, and you're taking the risk in behind. At some point, your defense is gonna break down. You can't expect the defense to just hold up over and over and over again. It's like, if you throw numbers back, well, maybe you'll get a goal on the counter, but in some game, you're probably not going to score because you're not taking the chances that you need to push numbers into the attack. It's a balance. And Inter Miami's idea is to just push numbers in the attack. I mean, Jordi Alba gets forward. They traded DeAndre Yedlin recently, and there's talk about another right back coming in that they're looking to add because they want somebody on that right side to give you a little bit of what Jordi Alba gives you. Probably not exactly the same, but more than DeAndre Yedlin gave you, because DeAndre Yedlin, he's quick, he projects forward well, he's got the experience, but technically speaking, not the best player to combine, doesn't have the most lethal final ball. So based on how they want to play, possession-based style, throwing numbers forward, they probably want someone that's a little more dangerous and lethal from that right flank to help balance out the attack and how they go about. So, I mean, their priority is not to defend. Their priority is not to sit back. Their priority is not to hold the other team to zero. They want to score goals, and they just want to overwhelm you with the attack. The Orlando City game is the perfect blueprint for how you would want to see, or how Inter Miami wants to see itself play. High octane, lots of goals, fun, just overwhelming you and knocking the stuffing out of you. That's the Inter Miami idea. That's the plan with this group. We'll see if they can piece it together over the long haul.
And that's the thing. There's already proof that they can do that quickly. Like we saw them that second game in Leagues Cup last year against Atlanta. It was like one after another, just hit after hit. And it's like, oh, man, this team, when they're rolling, is pretty dangerous, to the surprise of absolutely nobody who's been watching soccer for the past few years. To that point, who is the most important player on this Miami roster that is not named Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, Sergio Busquets, or Jordi Alba?
Oh, man, I thought you were going to say Lionel Messi. So I would say Busquets is probably the second most important.
I agree with that. I agree.
That's a good question.
Because it's so interesting for me as a fan of both soccer and the league to see, okay, you mentioned Robert Taylor earlier. Like last year, Robert Taylor was like the biggest beneficiary of this new look Miami because he understood the assignment completely, and he still seems to be doing that. But like you saw people like Kremasky also having a big moment and stepping up in those. So it's like there's a lot of pieces there that make sense, but is there one to you that's like this is the one?
I would say Drake Callender, man. Drake Callender and goal at the other end, because if Inter Miami is going to push numbers forward into the attack and give those spaces in behind, they're going to give up chances at some point. And it's going to happen over the course of the season. And they need Drake Callender to be at the level that he showed during the Leagues Cup run. That Drake Callender is the Drake Callender they need, because that Drake Callender is going to save you goals. That Drake Callender is going to save you points. He's going to save you, some wins. Some draws, he's going to help you rack up the points. And Drake Callender, look, I think he's an amazing shot stopper. And I think he's grown tremendously from where he was a few years ago when he was, an unknown factor to anyone not paying attention to Miami, even the people that were paying attention to Miami. But he has had some rough moments. He had some rough moments in preseason. This past weekend, he got away with one that, probably shouldn't have gotten away with when he, went to go head the ball outside the penalty area and it just like skipped over him. And somehow the CF Montreal striker did not put the ball in the back of the net. Don't know how that happened. I mean, I do know how it happened, but, it was mind-boggling to watch. It was just like, comical error after comical error. And, someone in the press office was like, there's no play more MLS than that.
It's very true.
But they need Drake Callender to be at a good level. If they have an inconsistent Drake Callender, where one game he's playing well, like he did against the Galaxy, and then one game he's not playing so well and he, gives up a soft goal or two, I mean, that's not going to help them maximize their potential. So if you're looking at someone outside of the Fantastic Four, I think Drake Callender is the guy, because they're going to give up opportunities and they need him to be at his shot stopping best. Look, he's not the best player with the ball at his feet. Is he the best coming off his line in terms of catching balls that are being crossed in? Probably not. I mean, he's still young. He's still gaining experience, but his shot blocking is superb when he's at his highest level. And I think that's the Drake calendar that you need to see this year. If that doesn't happen, if he's up and down and inconsistent, then I think this team could struggle a bit more than people would expect.
No, that's definitely a good answer, because I was going to mention him and just a little bit of inconsistency, what we've seen recently. But then again, last year he showed us, like, if he's at an elite level, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for people to kind of break that team down if he's making stops the way he was. We talked about Supporters Shield. We talked about CONCACAF Champions Cup. Leagues Cup is a whole different conversation. At the end of the day, the expectation of this team is what? They have to win MLS Cup. They have to win one trophy, whatever that may be. They have to try to defend Leagues Cup. Like, what is the real expectation for this year to, I guess, not be called a bad season or a failure? Because we saw with LAFC last year where they're like, we're competing for all these trophies, and sure, it's a good thing that we're in these positions to do so. And they ended up coming home empty-handed. And it's like, I don't know how excited they are as a group to be like, yeah, we're getting to these roles in these games like they mentioned publicly, but then, they didn't win one. So what is the real expectation for this team this year?
If you're asking my opinion, I think it's MLS Cup. I think it's the most important trophy that's in front of them that they have a realistic chance of winning. Again, we talked about the CONCACAF Champions Cup. I think if they go up against Mexican opposition, it's tan fritos. I don't see them outdoing a Mexican team in a 2-leg series. MLS, it can be done. They finish, let's say, in the top 4, top 5 in the Eastern Conference. They get a home game here or there in the playoffs, and then they get hot. The difference makers that they have, they can make MLS Cup, and then winning MLS Cup and getting that first star above the crest. You've got 4 over there on that U.S. Women's National Team jersey. So if you get one of those in MLS, and it's the first one in your club history, and Messi's in the photo holding the trophy, I think that's a success. I think it's memorable. It's going to be historic because it's Inter Miami's first. It's the storybook ending to the year, because if they win Champions Cup, let's say they go and win it, it's absolutely a great feat. Absolutely an amazing accomplishment. And they would get to go play in the Club World Cup, where they'll compete against even higher level teams, which absolutely would be an incredible feat. But they don't have an MLS Cup. I think for me, and I know some people disagree wholeheartedly, they would take the Champions Cup over MLS Cup if they had to choose one between the other. If it was me and I had to put all my eggs in one basket, I'd go for the MLS Cup. I get, like I told my podcast co-host, if they win Champions Cup, absolutely, they're the second MLS team to do so. They get to play in the Club World Cup, but it's more for brand recognition, because they're not gonna win they're not gonna win the Club World Cup, right? Like, you're going up against like Real Madrid, like it's just not gonna happen. There's a reason why the European teams have won for so many years in a row. The last team that won that was not a European team was Corinthians, right? With Paolo Guerrero scoring, Peruvian. Scoring in the decisive goal against Chelsea, and I think it was in 2013. So it's been a long time. So if they're going to go to the Club World Cup, it's literally just for growing the brand, marketing. Exactly. They're just going to market themselves. Oh, MLS is here, and here's Messi's team, and that's great. That's great exposure. Awesome to be playing it at a higher level, absolutely. But if I had to pick one or the other, and I'm Inter Miami, I'm going for MLS Cup. And like ending the year, because MLS Cup's in December, with that highlight of winning the trophy and lifting it and having that ceremony and saying, all right, we set out to do something in MLS and we did it, then awesome. Then I think that is, one that's the most attainable goal for them, because they're not playing an Open Cup. Leagues Cup, they already won. Like, what does winning it again do? Like, okay, they're back-to-back Leagues Cup champions. What does that mean? Does that mean anything to anybody? No. So, look, they got a trophy last year in the Leagues Cup, great, but I don't think that it should be that much of a priority this year. Supporters Shield, because of the players they'll be missing. Messi and co, the Cuatro Fantásticos, they're going to be rested at different points of the year just because they're older. I mean, we've seen them train individually at points already in these opening weeks of the season, away from the rest of the group. So, like, they're good. Inter Miami's not going to be at full strength over the course of the year. So, Supporters Shield is out of the question, in my opinion. I think it's MLS Cup. MLS Cup is the trophy that they should really, really set out to win. And if they do, for me, it's a successful season. Less than that, I mean, they'd have to win Champions Cup to offset that. If they don't win either Champions Cup or MLS Cup this season, to me, would be considered a failure. I don't care what they do in Leagues Cup.
No, I agree. I agree with all of that, man. I mean, I think you CONCACAF is so early right now that you have the chance to kind of go for it. And once again, so many teams getting into the playoffs for MLS playoffs, like unless something drastic happens, they'll be there. Unlike last year where they're climbing from behind and trying to hope for some magic. But you're right. I mean, that's the one that holds weight for the fan base, for the club, and having that star above the crest is like, that's kind of what the goal is for them, to have all these players here and try to do that. But yeah, it has to be one or the other, because I agree with you. Like, if they win Leagues Cup again, it's like, okay, cool, they did it twice, but it's between MLS Cup and CONCACAF Championship.
I want to add this, because I know some people think I'm crazy that I think MLS Cup, which obviously on the grand scheme of things is not as high as an international cup, but it would be the first MLS Cup. And I think that holds significant weight. If Inter Miami had already won an MLS Cup, let's say with Gonzalo Higuain 2 years ago, then cool, they've already done that. They've already accomplished that. So like, they've already achieved that milestone. So yes, Champions Cup should be that next bar that they're reaching for. But they haven't won this one yet. And I think that would hold more weight longer term than if they won the Champions Cup and then they played one game or two games in the Club World Cup and then that was it. Like, yes, they won the Champions Cup, and again, that would be an incredible feat. But the memory of having Messi in your history books as the player that helped you win your first trophy, that gave you that first star above the crest, I think that holds its weight in gold, and I think that's the most realistic opportunity for Inter Miami to win a significant piece of hardware this year.
No, I like that call. That's a great shout for sure. Having it be the first one in franchise history. Like, you saw how excited they were just off a Leagues Cup last season. Like, imagine that being MLS Cup. It kind of like puts it on a different level, I guess, for them. I want to ask you one just like offbeat question about Inter Miami. Like, how is the atmosphere down in South Florida? Because I mean, obviously, I think people know now, like, they play in Fort Lauderdale, but there's something to be said about like the pink shirt has gotten so popular over the past year. And like, I'm in Colombia and I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
I'm in Europe and I'm seeing it, and I'm just like, yo, like, this is a team that people were, I want to say, bought in kind of from the beginning, but obviously now it's just like reached a different level. Like, what's the atmosphere like in South Florida around a team that's not even just like, people going to the stadium and watching them, but just like what you see in public?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Andy. It's definitely exploded in terms of, you go to the mall now, you see Inter Miami jerseys left and right. You go to the bar and you see Inter Miami jerseys left and right on a day that there's not a game. So you see more of the impact that Inter Miami has had since Messi has arrived. Like, you see the corporate sponsors on the billboards, on the highway. If you go to Wynwood, and I know you probably go out there to party a little bit like I do, you see the murals of Inter Miami. Like, you see more of the footprint, and you see that it's become, in South Florida, it's always been a soccer city, but not necessarily an MLS city. And I think it's grown in the aspect of becoming an MLS city, but I would still say it's not fully like an MLS city. The reason for that, I mean, it's still not part of the daily conversation here, man. Unless you're like, you go looking for it. Unless you're, a fan that's looking for either podcasts like the one I do, or, you're on Reddit, or, you're talking with your friends in your private group chats. It's still not part of the daily conversation, not on talk radio. It still doesn't resonate in the same way. Look, the only local newspaper, and there's 3 in the Tri-County area, which is Miami-Dade, Broward County, and Palm Beach. The only newspaper that sends someone out consistently and regularly, like a beat writer, is the Miami Herald. Sun Sentinel doesn't send anybody consistently, not to practice, not to games. Palm Beach Post doesn't send anybody regularly to practice or to games. To me, and listen, I know the state of newspapers. I've been doing this for a living for a long time, so I understand clearly the state of things and that newspapers are bleeding out. I get all of that. But if you have arguably the best player of all time in your backyard, and you can't dedicate resources while you have, at least 2 writers for the Heat in basketball, or at least two for the Dolphins in football. I mean, that to me still shows you that, like, while it's definitely become more of a boom, and it's definitely, the tide has risen, it hasn't risen as high as it should have, or as it should be, or where it should be at. Because, it's still just not part of the daily conversation. I mean, you go to an office, or is everyone talking about the Inter Miami game from the day before? Maybe, maybe not. Are they talking about the Dolphins? Yeah. Are they talking about the Heat, if the Heat are in the finals or the Heat are in the playoffs? Yeah, you're going to hear more people talking about it. So, like MLS, it's still growing. I wish it was not at this level. I wish it was part of more of the daily fabric. I love talking football. I love talking soccer. I wish it was at a higher level in terms of coverage, in terms of attention. And it's crazy because you see a lot of coverage on game days from Inter Miami, right? Like it's all over social media and everyone's tuning in. Like you said earlier, the eyes are on Chase Stadium. I would say the eyes of the world are on every Inter Miami game. Like you've got people from all corners of the world watching Messi and what he's doing, what the team is doing, and how they're playing and performing. But in the day-to-day locally, like that buzz that was initially here has died down. And I mean, that was expected because, we go to practice now and there's maybe 10 of us. And only a few of us are like consistent regulars that attend practice and that have covered the team, since day one. And it's not like you see the same 10 people. It's usually, the core 4 or 5 and then some new people sprinkled in that rotate just depending on whatever they have going on. So it's still not where it needs to be. Hopefully the Messi boom, hopefully the World Cup in 2026, hopefully it takes this thing to another level. Hopefully this is all just, accelerates the attention and the interest because while it has risen, it's still not there yet where it's part of the daily fabric of, conversation here in South Florida.
That insight is interesting. And it is a reason I asked that because I've like being around LAFC, the expansion team. And then the past few years I've been to like every expansion home opener. I was in St. Louis last year, Charlotte the year before that, Austin the year before that. And obviously results and all of that has a factor in a say in like how much the fans still stick around and how much of that buzz continues or dies down. But if you're not playing well, if you're not bringing in certain players, like it does dwindle down. So I'm always interested to see locally because we do know nationally, globally, people are going to be interested on what Messi is doing. But South Florida, man, there's so much going on. And it reminds me kind of here like LA, like it's too cool, bro. There's too much to do. So it's
too many options, bro. There's too many options to spend your money and your time on, bro. And if you don't have a top-notch team, then it's going to be, you're going to have a challenge to fill the stadium consistently, especially in a sport that's outdoors where you're battling the elements, whether it's heat and humidity, whether it's rain, whether it's cold, if, it's a rare cold day in South Florida. So, you have to have a good product and you have to have a competitive team, especially again, this is a football city. Don't make no mistake about it. South Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, it's a football area, but it's not necessarily an MLS area yet. And I think hopefully if Messi has a successful tenure here, hopefully that will start to change because then you can say, all right, South Florida is an MLS city. Because right now I wouldn't say it's an MLS city. Even with Messi here, I wouldn't say that South Florida is an MLS city. If it was, you'd be hearing this on the radio. You'd be seeing more of the news, the TV stations, out to practice and then dedicating more resources to it. But it's just not there yet, unfortunately. Hopefully, I won't be too old. Hopefully, I'll benefit from it in some way, shape, or form financially, and it'll finally get to where I think it needs to get to. But no, I just in general, jokes aside, just for the daily. I'm a football guy, man. I'm a football guy since I was a kid. Like I told you, like I would like to see the sport in all markets, but especially here in my hometown, get to that level with MLS, whether you like MLS, whatever your opinion is of MLS, because it's the top division in the States and Canada. Don't want to pull Don Carper there and forget about Canada. But it's the top flight. If this is the best chance to have that level of conversation where the sport can get there and be more of part of the daily fabric, then hopefully that it gets there because I would love nothing more than to see my kids or the next generation and the generation after that be like, they care about what happens to Inter Miami. Like they care about what happens to Miami Heat. They care about what happens to the Miami Dolphins. You talk about winning. Miami Dolphins haven't won anything in like my whole life. But yeah, they have history, right? Whereas Inter Miami's still building that history. Hopefully it gets there, man. Hopefully it gets there sooner rather than later. Because South Florida, there's so much love for the sport here. You can go to any part of any corner of any city, and you've got people either playing on fields, you've got them playing street soccer. You see people just playing in a park with coconuts or t-shirts or cones, whatever. Like the sport, the beautiful game is immensely popular here. It's just about now convincing all these people to buy into MLS, and I think that's where MLS and Inter Miami will have work to do. Hopefully, with some wins and maybe some more trophies, that happens.
Yeah, and that's the tough part about being a new team. Like you have to build that history. And what's happening now is part of the history in the future that people are going to look back on and say, okay, Messi came, he won a Leagues Cup. What else did he win? So exactly. it all comes hand in hand there. Listen, if you're going to South Florida, you could go watch Messi, and you could also go see the street art in Wynwood. As enthusiasts of both, I recommend both.
Go to Perro Negro in Wynwood.
Aye. That's a different conversation for a different podcast. As a fan and on a personal level, this is my last like soccer, I guess, my Inter Miami question is how cool is it for you when you take a step back to be like, yo, I'm part of this right now. Like I'm covering a team that, granted, I know Messi's not like doing interviews and stuff like that, and maybe the others are not talking as much. I have seen them speak here and there, but I was always taken aback. Like when Zlatan was here in LA, I'm like, yo, this is crazy. And like even speaking to Carlos Vela on occasion, Chicharito, like just the different like stars that are just people that we watch play in Europe in these high levels. Like how cool is it for you on a personal level to take a step back and be like, wow, man, this is unique and it doesn't happen for everybody.
On a personal level, I mean, it's neat that I'm one of the few that covers this team consistently and day in and day out. But like honestly, man, like maybe it's because I've been a little bit spoiled in my journalistic career. I mean, I finished school here at FAU and I got a job offer to cover the Red Bulls. And Thierry Henry was there, Tim Cahill, Rafa Marquez. Then NYCFC came, and you had Andrea Pirlo, you had Frank Lampard, you had David Villa. I spent time coming back to Florida. Orlando City was starting up. They had Kaká. So like I've covered a lot of world recognized players. Obviously, Messi is in another stratosphere. Messi's at another level. But just being so into it and so focused on what's going on, like it's hard for me to take a step back and really appreciate what's going on in this time. Like I'm aware that Messi's here, and I'm aware it's not going to be for forever. But I'm just so focused on the day to day and everything that it's really hard to just take a step back and really appreciate the moment. I'm sure at some point after the Messi mania ends, that I'm sure there will be a time to step back and be like, man, those were wild 3 years, those were wild 4 years. Like I can't believe it's flown by, But right now it's really, really difficult to just kind of like take a step back and be like. But I will say this: like when Messi announced he was coming, and I started getting text messages from my personal friends who know what I do but aren't soccer people, I was like, okay, yeah. This is making more waves, and that's the type of waves hopefully it can continue to make and even surpass with the team playing more games, with hopefully getting more wins for the team, and hopefully for them getting trophies, because then I think the sport, like I said before, here and MLS will take it to another level that will sustain itself. Because when Messi leaves, that's the biggest question. That's a lot, a thing that a lot of people maybe aren't saying outwardly, or you haven't seen written, or you're not seeing a whole lot of coverage because it's early, but it's definitely a conversation that's being had from people in the press. It's definitely a conversation that's being had between, fans. What happens the day that Messi decides to leave? Then what? Because how do you sustain this level of interest? I don't think you can sustain it. It's about now mitigating the drop-off. And how do they do that? That's going to be an interesting challenge for Inter Miami. But that's probably, hopefully, for Inter Miami's sake, a few years down the road. But it's definitely a big question that they're going to have to figure out, because the day that Messi leaves, I mean, there's going to be a drop-off of some kind. How do they mitigate that and try to minimize the loss of interest from, worldwide it's going to happen, but, at least locally, sustaining some level of traction, some level of engagement and interest.
Yeah, no, for sure. What life looks like for Inter Miami after Messi and friends for sure is an important thing to keep in the back of your mind. But obviously, you're in the moment, like you mentioned. This guy's been around Inter Miami for so long. He's starting to answer questions like he plays for Tata Martino. He's focused on
the impossible. Never. I like Tata Martino a lot. He was definitely grumpy grandpa this weekend though, because he wasn't too happy, which has been rare for him in his time here. But like I said to some colleagues, I don't mind that he showed a little bit of his teeth. He snarled a little bit. That's good. It means that a regular season loss got to him. That means something to him. So yeah. I appreciate that. He was a little frustrated. I like that he was a little frustrated.
He actually showing, like I said, they're all showing emotion in that, which means they actually do care. Like I got to talk to Tata a few times when he was coaching the Mexican national team, and that was a whole different, storm over there. But like that passion and that emotion, you're going to show it regardless of what's happening. Let's end off with, you talked about Miami locally. Copa America is coming up soon here. You're obviously a big Peru fan. You've traveled many places to watch La Selección, and I love how the Peruvians have showed out over the years and just supported that team in the ups and the downs, because it's been quite a process for Peru. Copa America final gets awarded down to South Florida, which is going to be amazing. How excited are you for Copa America in general as a Peruvian? We're going to be traveling again for the tournament following Peru, and and hoping that things are better than what people are saying it's going to be like right now? Or you kind of just like, like hopefully we do the best we can and then keep it moving?
Honestly, man, with Peru, ya como que estoy decepcionado un poco. Like it's been a bit of a disappointment. Since I was a big Gareca guy, like as just a fan, not a member of the media. I was, a huge proponent and fan of Ricardo Gareca and the job he did when he was head coach. When they didn't renew him, because of all the political things, and you can talk about money or whatnot. But when he didn't get renewed, I was like, it's gonna go downhill from here because look, Peru pound for pound, like, and again, this is we're talking relatively speaking here. So before anybody jumps out of their seat here, relatively speaking, Peru pound for pound is the opposite of Inter Miami in South American qualifiers. They don't have they have some individual talent, but pound for pound with the other teams, like on paper, they shouldn't be finishing in the top 5 in South America. And they finished in the top 5 during his 2 cycles as head coach. They got to 2 World Cup qualifying playoffs, the repechajes. They won 1 against New Zealand to get to 2018, and then they unfortunately lost to Australia on penalty kicks after a draw in Qatar, so they didn't make it to the 2022 World Cup. I was in Qatar for that repechaje, and that was a tough one to stomach. I thought Gareca squeezed all the lime, or squeezed all the juice out of that lime or out of that orange, if you want to use a Florida term, because he made the most out of what little he had. He made that team more than the sum of its parts. And once he left, I thought it was going to be very hard to find whoever the next coach was to maintain that level. Because again, Peru pound for pound just does not have it. And right now there hasn't been much of a generational change. There was a new head coach that came in, and Juan Reynoso just wasn't able to get the most out of the team. They struggled in a big way, despite having much of the same squad. Now there's another head coach. We'll see how he does. I don't have high hopes for Peru in the Copa America. They normally have a good showing in Copa America. Fun fact for you, Andy, and I don't know if you know this, 2016, the Copa America was last year. U.S. Soccer reached out to a bunch of different media members that were freelancers that weren't working for an outlet like full time. They wanted people for every team to do social media to help promote the tournament, essentially to help sell tickets. They reached out to me and they asked me, would you want to do this? Would you, be somebody that follows one of the teams? You'll travel with them, you'll eat with them, whatever. You'll be on the charters with them. I was like, okay. They're like, give us 3 teams because everybody wants Argentina, Brazil, and I think they said Colombia or the U.S. I don't remember. And I was like, I don't want any of them. I put Peru number 1. I think I put Costa Rica 2 and maybe US 3, something along those lines. Anyway, I ended up getting Peru, and I worked with them behind the scenes. Normally, I'm on this side of the tape asking the questions. I worked behind the scenes with them, and I had some of the most incredible experiences from a career standpoint. Just being on that side of things was eye-opening, and it was an experience I'll take with me. They beat Brazil in the final group stage game in Foxborough.
There.
And Dunga got fired after that. The Peru team was so happy, and obviously I'd been with them now a couple of weeks. They took a team photo in the locker room as they do after any win, and I was part of that picture. They told me to get in. They were just so happy, and it was awesome, man. It was awesome as a Peruvian person, as a fan, and as a journalist that works in the sport. I mean, I had some incredible experiences, man. I went out to eat with Paulo Guerrero after your Colombia knocked Peru out in MetLife Stadium on penalty kicks in the quarterfinals. So some incredible memories. I don't think I'll be doing that again. I don't know if U.S. Soccer is doing that, taking that approach again for this Copa America, but absolutely one of my favorite memories that I've had in my career and in my life. Dude, like I have that picture, have it on my Instagram. Like my dad before he passed, he said he wanted to blow it up and have it on his wall because it was just a neat moment for a Peruvian American kid, man. Just being behind the scenes with the team and seeing how they're like, being on the bus, listening to the music they play, the jokes that they have, seeing how a team really is made up of. Because we talk a lot about it as media members, like, oh, what's it like in the locker room? Oh, what it would like to be, fly on the wall and see what the dynamics are like. I was that fly on the wall. I was just, I was around, and you see the dynamics, you see the personalities, you see how some players are always together, how some players like to be alone. You see all these little things that you just really don't think about when you're on the other side, whether you're a fan or a media member. So awesome experience. I'm looking forward to the Copa America here. Don't know how it's going to go for Peru. I don't have high hopes for them, but should be a fun summer of football in the United States and definitely in South Florida.
I love that, man. That's awesome. It's a full circle moment. We started off, I told you, you're only going to get some exclusive stuff here. We started talking about the press box in the bathroom at the
There
stadium.
you go. See?
Behind the scenes with Peru. Copa
De
America.
menos a más. We go from menos a más. We don't go más to menos, all right? We do it the other way around. We build up, all right? We don't come flying down.
We only deliver the gems here, man. That's awesome, though. Yeah, I love it. I was all over following Colombia that 2016 tournament too. So I could only imagine what it is like to be behind the scenes at a team that you like genuinely love and still root for with like all your heart.
Some of the players I've grown up watching, as a fan, and I'm not the type of person that's like, oh, selfie. Like, that's never been me. Right. But like working behind the scenes and again having lunch with Pablo Guerrero paying for my lunch because he was like, oh, I got it. Like that's an incredible moment. It's a nice moment that I'll take with me and I'll cherish for the rest of my life. It shows me a little bit about him as a person, and then just to share that sort of. Here's another little gem for you. After we had that lunch, he had bought so much clothes in the United States at the bougie designer stores that he needed another suitcase to take back to Peru because he just didn't have enough space in his luggage. So we went to Target and we're looking for suitcases. And my mom calls me just coincidentally. My phone starts ringing. Like, I don't know why this dude, it's so unlike me. I picked up and I put it to Paolo's ear and Paolo's like, hello. And my mom's like, she didn't recognize the voice. She's like, who is this in Spanish? Right? And he goes, Pablo Guerrero. My mom was like, what? No way. And she was like mind blown that she was speaking to Pablo Guerrero on the phone. And then I let them talk for 10 seconds and I was like, all right, thanks, Pablo. And I took the phone back. And she was like, mind blown. So just a neat moment, just cool. So I'm looking forward to the Copa America. Curious to see how it compares to the tournament from 8 years ago. I can't believe I was thinking about that today. It's been 8 years, dude. Time has flown by. I was thinking, I'm 35, I'm about to be 36. How old was I then? I was like, wow, I was 28. So time has gone by incredibly fast. It doesn't feel like it's been 8 years, to be honest with you.
Man, time flies, man. I love all of those anecdotes. Talking about food, where this is the last question, and I can't let you go without asking you about food because Peruvian food is so elite. And if you're not aware of that, I don't know what you've been doing with your life. I need you to get aware, get familiar. But I'm gonna ask you your top 3 favorite Peruvian dishes because I'm sure you could list off a whole list of many. But top 3, and then we'll let you go about your way, man, because I know it's kind of late down there in South Florida, so I appreciate it.
It's early. It's early for me. It's early. It's 10 o'clock. Let's see. You want me to go 3, 2, 1, or you want me to go 1, 2, 3?
3, 2, 1. That's a 3, 2, 1.
Oof, okay, then you make me think a little more.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm cool either one.
All right, 1, 2, 3 makes it easier because I know my favorite.
Yeah, let's do 1, 2, 3.
Ceviche rocoto, which is the ceviche, the fish, not mixto, not all the seafood, different type of seafood, just the fish. Rocoto is a pepper that we have. It's spicy. Usually it comes out to be like little reddish or a little pink. And it's really, really good. So I would say that was my go-to meal. Whenever I came down from New York when I was still living in New York and I'd come home, that would be my first meal. Ceviche rocoto from one of the local restaurants here close to where I live. You can't go wrong with a lomo saltado. It tends to be a lot of people's favorite. I really like yuca de huancaína, which is more of an appetizer than a plate. But that sauce is so good. I like a good causa too, so I just gave you 4, so I just cheated. Anticuchos, I'm giving you 5. But hey, listen, Peruvian food is top notch. I won't say Colombian food is anywhere close to it, but I do like a good bandeja paisa, and I do really love a good Colombian empanada. Like, I love Peruvian empanadas. If you've never tried a Peruvian empanada, try it. It's made of flour, and it's completely different than the fried empanada from Colombia, but I really enjoy a good Colombian empanada con su ajicito. So good. I think I had a few before I watched Peru beat Colombia in Barranquilla in 2022.
Where I was also at that game as well, man.
that was one of my favorite memories as a fan, going to a game, because like the Colombia deserved to win that game 100%, and for Peru to steal that late, and I mean practically that knocked you guys out and pushed Peru onto what was essentially the repechaje, which they didn't capitalize on. But in the moment, not knowing what the future would hold, like away from home, Peru barely ever beats Colombia. It was, one of the best feelings as a fan, like for sure. Cloud 9, we were all in ecstasy about just how the game unfolded, because we didn't expect Peru to win with how well Colombia played, and un descuido atrás and You
It's
know.
all it takes. All it takes. And like I said earlier about the Peruvian fan base showing out, like I was in Barranquilla a few days before the game, and I'm like, yo, they're everywhere around this damn city. Like it wasn't like just you would go to one place and it would be a bunch of Peruvians. They're like everywhere I looked, I was like, bro, they coming there hot for this game. So
Well,
it
my
was
brother, I mean, Peruvians like football, but Peruvians also like Colombia for many reasons. So, it's not, you don't get to see a lot of Colombians day to day when you're in Peru, bro. So, any chance Peruvians will be like, oh, we're going to Colombia for a game and we get to go to Colombia, oh, we're definitely going. So, that's why I can imagine you saw a lot of Peruvians in droves there because it was a trip that shouldn't have been missed for sure, especially with where Peru was in the standings and how things were unfolding.
wise words from my brother Franco Panizo, man. I appreciate you joining me, coming through, kicking it with me. Miami Total Football Radio. Make sure you check it out. I'll make sure everything is linked up. Keep up the great work, brother. Proud of you. Always room for you. Hopefully, I'll be down in South Florida again at some point. We'll kick it, make a Wynwood visit this time, and not just
absolutely, bro.
Bucks.
Absolute Perro Negro awaits us, bro. I think I'm going this weekend, to be honest with you. Look, I'm wearing my Medellin shirt right now, bro. I got my little Colombian swag on, Peruvian. I'm like the most Colombian Peruvian out there as of lately, bro. I don't know. It's some influence that's happening in my life. I don't know where it's coming from, but
my boy's locked in. My boy's locked in and focused. Hey, man, I appreciate you once again, and please do not, whatever you do, please do not go ringing Jordi Alba's doorbell. Please.
Nah, that was hilarious. I got the shout out on the TV too, so that was nice. That was hilarious. I really like Tata Martino in terms of his persona, and I think he's a good head coach. I know there's a lot of criticism with the way the team's been playing, but I like how he carries himself professionally, and like he makes little jokes. I like how he carries himself. So that was a pretty funny remark from him, and one that'll stick with me. Also made my mom very proud to hear my name on TV. I think I saw her recording it with her iPhone. Like she rewound it. Like,
yeah, I love it. Franco, man, I appreciate you again, brother. Thanks again.
Thanks, brother. We'll talk soon.
La buena, brother. Yes, sir, Ski. Franco Panizo from South Florida, man. Love it. Great chat. We could have been talking for a long time after this because there was a lot of stories there that I wasn't even aware of, and I just feel like there's so much more to untap. That's why I love it. I love just getting guests on, people that I know that are doing dope things, and just kind of chopping it up, seeing where the conversation takes us and whatnot. Before I get out of here quickly, NFL free agency is going crazy, so I have to mention a few things. Saquon Barkley is going to the Eagles. If you know a Giants fan, please hug them because they are down tremendously bad. Shout out to my brother Keith, man. I know he's hurting because he's a big Saquon guy. But leaving the Giants in that manner because of the way things have transpired is one thing, but leaving the Giants and going to a division rival is a whole different ball game. The Eagles offense is going to be nasty, which it was last year, but now having Saquon with Jalen Hurts, I'm sure Kelsey's probably like, damn, I shouldn't have retired. I should have stayed and blocked for this guy. But now Nick Sirianni has no excuses. They need to turn up. And I'm sure they're thinking Super Bowl or bust in Philly, which is probably always the case anyway. So shout out to them, man. That's a huge move. Kirk Cousins got the bag again. I don't know what Kirk Cousins, how he's been doing it for these past years, but finesse God, bro. He's had the craziest contracts, and he's just been bouncing around. I don't think it's going to make that team that much better, but I do think that he is a good quarterback. And Atlanta has the pieces to be able to be competitive enough. I just don't think that it puts them at like a elite level in the NFC or NFL. But then again, that division is not the strongest. It's for the taking. So, Kirk Cousins in Atlanta is not a terrible look. Not a terrible look at all. Who else did we have? Oh, Russell Wilson to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, I don't know. If you're a Steelers fan, are you happy about that? I like Russ. I just think obviously he's been around for a decent amount of time now. He's been getting the, ups and downs. I think he still has something to give, but I also don't know if Pittsburgh is the greatest place for him to be at. I don't know. I just don't see too much from that offense, but maybe he could turn up with a little bit of a vengeance for how things ended in Denver and go there and show out a little bit. That's a tougher division than talking about the NFC South where Atlanta's in. So who knows? Josh Jacobs joining the Packers, kind of getting replacing Aaron Jones in that backfield. I think it's a pretty good look for the Packers, who we saw last season. Jordan Love is nothing to be played with. They have a pretty solid team, and I think adding a running back like that who is explosive in his own ways and can do a lot of different things, maybe better than Aaron Jones. I think that's a good look for the Packers. Who else do we got here? The Patriots haven't been doing much, so I'm not gonna gas them up. Jacoby Brissett's coming back to town. I just need them to please have a good draft. I don't know what quarterback they're gonna take. Mac Jones is on his way to Jacksonville. Cool, thanks. I'm very indifferent about the Patriots right now. I just hope for Gerard Mayo's sake that they draft well and things kind of take the right steps, because we can't expect them to be great, but we can expect them to have a different approach now that Bill Belichick's not around, and try to make those strides to getting better. Austin Eckler to Washington is a pretty good look, I think. I think I saw somebody mention this earlier, like the movement of running backs, like in a few years ago, would have had everybody like, oh my God. But now, because the game has changed so much, running back markets and running backs kind of just getting swapped is not crazy, crazy. But there's some movement in NFL, and NFL never rests. So it's going to be interesting to see how things continue to pan out. I mean, we're so far away from even seeing NFL football again, but I had to say something about Saquon because that's crazy. But all right, man, I've been talking for too long. It's like an hour and 5 minutes. I apologize for the long episode. I appreciate everybody for tapping in again. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, you see the U.S. Women's National Team jersey I'm wearing. Shout out to them, champions of the Gold Cup. Please like the episode, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff, man. Like I mentioned, just show love. It's free and it helps me and it helps you just make your day better. You know what I mean? Episode 3 is coming quickly. I will tell you that. I will tell you it's not a soccer episode. It's a community episode. It's some real LA stuff going on. And that's all I'm going to say about that. All right. Once again, thanks for the love and support. I will catch you the next time. Until then, we out. Peace.